And we should be live. So the first thing I'm going to do is display our names so that everybody can see who's in this conversation today. Hi, everybody. My name is Jay Frost. And if you are new to this series, this is, of course, the Philanthropy Mastermind series brought to you by DonorSearch. So thank you, first of all, to them for letting us have these great conversations with people in the field of philanthropy and fundraising. We are doing it today with another leader who has a great book, and I'm going to introduce her to you in a moment. Before I do that, I, of course, want to welcome you here, and I want to encourage you to take part in this discussion by utilizing the Q&A section of the website, which you can see right before you. In fact, as you're logging in, you can probably see a couple of things on your screen, one of which will be a picture of us two talking together. Another will be a little call to action. So if you want to know more about DonorSearch or try their products, if you're familiar with them, you can just click that to take a look. There's also a survey at the very end, which will let you just let us know what you thought about this session. But I want to encourage you also to let us know more generally about what you want to see and hear. And since the chat isn't operating at the moment, I want to encourage you to do that by simply writing to me directly. You can reach me at that's J-A-Y, at DonorSearch.net, J@DonorSearch.net. You can also find me by just tooling around on social media. I'm there on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and so forth. And I want to encourage you to be a part of determining what you see in the future, just as today's session is a result of that same kind of conversation. So I want to give a shout out first, in fact, to our friend Kimberly McKenzie, who I've worked with on another podcast, for introducing me to Cindy Wagman, who I'm going to be introducing to you now. So let me just do that, and then I'll say hello officially. So Cindy is the president and founder of The Good Partnership. Look that up. I'm sure she'll provide you the link in a few minutes. A values-driven, social justice-informed consultancy that's working to unlock the potential of small nonprofits through fundraising. And don't go away if you're not at a small nonprofit, because everything she's going to talk about, including in her book, pertains to everybody I know, big and small. But this is going to be particularly relevant if you're in a place where people really need that extra boost or that booster shot, and she'll give it to you. Cindy became a CFRE in 2009 and received her MBA from the Rotman School at the University of Toronto in 2013. She's presented for AFP, CanadaHelps, CharityVillage, Bloomerang, Keela, Fundraising Everywhere, et cetera, et cetera. She's also the host of the Small Nonprofit podcast, so put that on your listening list. Canada's #1 podcast for charities and best-selling author of, and the reason why we're meeting today, the book Raise It, The Reluctant Fundraiser's Guide to Raising Money Without Selling Your Soul. And with that, I want to thank you so much, Cindy, for hanging out today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
It's really great to have you and to have a chance to speak with you as we are heading into the giving season. I know that, yeah, I know. Yes, please let this be a great year. And I know you're going to bring your characteristic enthusiasm and joy to everything we talk about. But there's a lot of this reluctance that I know must be amplified this time of year, that people are afraid. If they're afraid to ask at all, it must be even worse now. Let me just check myself. Is that true? Is this a rough time of year for fundraising?
That is so true. Yeah. So I always talk about, there are sort of two buckets of fundraisers. There's the fundraisers who, they're career fundraisers. We love this work. We are lit up with the experience of generosity from all the people we get to work with, and asking is empowering and exciting, and we love it. That is very small as a bucket compared to the other bucket, which are executive directors who are reluctant to fundraise, but they don't have anyone else on their team who can do it, or the board members who are recruited because they're a great lawyer, and then all of a sudden they're expected to be asking for money, or program staff who also have to support fundraising asks. I've seen administrators, like an EA type position, have to write year-end appeals in organizations. So there's that bucket is much bigger, and whether or not that's, as you said before, you who are joining us, or someone in your world who you need to participate in fundraising, it's very, very common. And yes, at this time of year, we see it a lot. We see this feeling of, or donors don't want to hear from us. So we're imposing when we ask too much, or we can't send that many emails, because what if people unsubscribe? And so there's this whole feeling of anxiety and fear that comes up for reluctant fundraisers at this time of year, which, I mean, I'm excited and our clients are excited, but most people who are reluctant fundraisers don't look forward to it.
It's kind of funny, because if we are both in the business of fundraising in whatever role, but also we're probably donors. And so I wonder why we aren't making that connection, that if we get 2 or 3 or 4 email from our favorite causes, do we necessarily say, stop that, I hate this? I mean, but we are very reluctant to send 3 or 4 email. What do you think that disconnect is? Why is that so?
Yeah, so a lot of it is how our brains function, actually. And so our brains work to create shortcuts for decisions. And those shortcuts are developed, they're truly like neural pathways that are what happens when we experience or do something for the first time. Like these neurons sort of like they sort of jump from pathway to pathway. And the more we repeat something, they start to connect and it becomes a shortcut in our mind. And so, sorry, my doorbell just went, despite me telling them not to ring the doorbell, but my kids will get it. So, but my dog is barking too.
It's probably somebody who's listening right now. They're coming.
Actually, it's a piano teacher. Hopefully the kids get it. So what happens is these shortcuts become, we're not aware that it's actually a shortcut. So if we think of our brain as making all these decisions every day, we make about 35,000 remotely conscious decisions. That represents about 10% of the total number of decisions we make every day. Okay, so there are all of these decisions that we're not aware we're making. And that's usually, it's like autopilot, and that's usually what's showing up. We don't take a step back to say, well, I'm a donor too, and this is what happens. Instead, we let the stories and our experiences of all the work that we've done over and over and over again in our lives and in our work drive the bus, so to speak. And so for a lot of people, and we project meaning onto these interactions with people or through email. So for example, this came up actually recently, is I feel like people, most people give to organizations because someone they know asks them, or I'm familiar with all the rides and walkathons and runs. And so that I think of giving as a personal favor. And so when I'm now getting ready to send my emails, I feel like, oh my God, I can't bother people too much. Then when that person doesn't respond, I project this meaning of, oh my goodness, they definitely don't want to give, right? And so if I ask them again, then I start to be harassing them. When in reality, what's probably happening, and I've experienced this myself, I've been on the side of this, which is chances are that person just has other stuff going on. And we know inboxes get flooded so quickly. I always tell the story of when my kids were younger, I had an email from a friend. They were doing a campaign. I was going to support them. And just before I was about to make the donation, my kids, I had to go pick them up. They came home a disaster. They were hangry as just really hangry. And it's the kind of night where I just fed them cereal for dinner just to get food in their stomachs and calm them down. And by the end of that night, I was so done that I went straight to bed. The nights where you go to bed at the same time as your kids, that was the night. And when I woke up in the morning, my inbox had a lot more emails. And so that intention of giving and supporting my friend, kind of fell by the wayside. And so and that's usually, the reality of what's happening for people. But because we have all these stories we're telling ourselves, we project these false meanings on people's lack of response to us. And so that's usually honestly what goes on with people is we think, we either doubt our own value as an organization or as leaders. And so, why would people want to give to us? We're not the big organization, or we don't, we have our own imposter feelings. There's so many different narratives that taint our interactions with fundraising that can show up for people.
It sounds, the way you've described it, sounds so similar to the feelings that we have as human beings when we send a note to a friend and we don't hear back right away. And maybe we send them 2 notes, then we think, oh, they're ghosting us or something. But in fact, often it's just what you said. There are other things intervening in their lives. It's not about us. It really isn't. It's about something for them. But building that patience is tough stuff, especially when we don't know them. So, and we're often communicating outward with a lot of people in fundraising. So that takes a great deal of not just patience, but kind of emotional self-control, not to feel bad when people don't respond.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you said something that really struck a nerve for me, which is like, we always feel like we're having these outward or pushed conversations. One of the things that I recommend to organizations or anyone, professional fundraisers or reluctant fundraisers, is just to connect with your donors. Don't make it that push conversation. You have to meet with them virtually or in person. You don't have to meet with every single donor, but you have to make a habit of connecting, not just with your major gift donors, with every level and type of supporter on a regular basis, so that you start to figure out that actually you're not bothering them, right? They see the value in your work. And there's so many other benefits, like who you're talking to, so you can write better appeals that resonate with them. You know where to find more donors because you get to see the patterns of like who's giving and what do we know about them and how do we find more people like that. So there's so much benefit to connecting with your donors. And this is one, again, people's mindset blocks them. I repeat this advice ad nauseum. Like, I say this all the time, and people need to hear it like 200 times before they actually take action, because they're afraid. They're afraid that the donor is going to ask them something they don't have the answer to. And that's, if they don't have the answer, it's going to make them feel like a fraud, or that they think the donation is going to be on the line and they won't get money. All of these, again, we're projecting all of our beliefs into this theoretical interaction that hasn't even happened, so much so that people don't even send the email to request the call. So there's so much we have to get out of our own way and work on it's rewiring those neural shortcuts in our brain to get out of our own way.
I so much want to talk to you about that, but before I go there, I have to say that you said one other thing a minute ago about this isn't just your major donors. This is all the donors. And there's been this conversation in our field for much of the last year, for good reason, that organizations have either favored certain donors or that we should stop doing that entirely. But it sounds to me like you're making an argument for actually treating every donor with care, but not to attach their lack of response to some kind of imagined interaction, which, as you just said, it doesn't always happen. So, but first I want to, again, check and make sure I'm hearing you correctly. So is this this approach that you're talking about, is this really something that we can approach every donor with? $25, $25 million.
Yes. And I mean, I always say, align your fundraising strategies with your organization and your mission, right? So I am a huge believer in sort of building a broad base of donors who are giving smaller amounts. I think that's great for an organization's stability. Almost 20 years ago, I wrote a thesis on why that can be empowering to the community and redistribute power. I don't need to go into all of that. But I personally think that that's a very important fundraising strategy for organizations. And we work predominantly with organizations that work around social justice and anti-oppression. And so to me, that's a very important part of their fundraising. I love when we empower those donors and look at them as the lifeblood of the organization. But absolutely, it's true. One of my personal largest donation, well, actually, not plural, my personal largest donation that I've raised in the millions, same thing. I do exactly the same kind of relationship building and engagement that I would for that multi-million dollar donor and that, $30 a month donor.
Yeah, they all deserve that care, but it's also equally effective, I guess, to treat them all that way.
And you can't scale and grow if you don't know who you're talking to. So while you might have, and I'm making up numbers, let's say you have 1,000 broad-based annual donors. I'm not saying you need to meet with every single one of them, but the more you meet with, the more you see the trends, and you can care for the mass of them in a meaningful way, because you understand a little bit more about them as a community or sub-communities within that. So you don't have to meet with all 1,000 donors. Maybe you meet with 50 or something like that over the course of a year or two. This, again, a lot of how we retrain our brain is to build habits. And so to me, meeting with donors is a habit that we should practice throughout our careers or lives as fundraisers.
Right. And the benefit of that, just to make sure you have the opportunity to say that really clearly, is what's the benefit?
So the benefit is, donors feel good when they get to share with you their feedback. You give them the opportunity to be more involved and to contribute in different ways. You have a better understanding of who your donors are, which means your communications are going to be better. Your fundraising strategy is going to be more aligned, and then you're going to be able to find more people like that, and learn how to leverage that community. And then, of course, to scale, right? The more you know about them, the more you can. I just presented on this or recorded a presentation on stewardship and automating stewardship. We can do so much. We can scale very quickly in fundraising with good systems, but the effectiveness of that scaling is not necessarily just in the tools. It's in our ability to connect across those tools, to connect through email with people. And to do that, we need to know who we're talking to.
Wow, this is so true. And now that there's a rush, for a good reason, to explore tools in AI machine learning. One of the concerns that I have is not about the tools, but about how we use them. And here I'm thinking specifically about using them as a way to avoid contact with donors instead of actually getting to know them better. So I don't know if that's something that you've had to explore with people or not.
Yeah, so we love 80-20 rule. So I give it the 80-20 rule. If you can automate 80%, it frees up your time, that 20%, to do hyper-personalized connecting, right? So that's how I love using technology. And I just had a really interesting conversation for our podcast. It's not aired yet, on AI in fundraising. But it's really the idea that it allows you to take care of the administration and the stuff that can be scaled, so that that extra time that you have can really be focused on. And again, it's not just which one donor. Sometimes we'll do, in fact, with a lot of our clients, we do thank you videos. So when a donation gets made, any amount, an automation gets sent to a tool that we use where we send a 30 to 40 second thank you video from one of us. It's kind of live in the sense that it's not fancy. It's just we're talking right now. And so it people feel like we're connecting, and it's really no extra work than it takes less than a minute per donor. But it has such a big impact. So yeah. I love that stuff.
Okay, well, I know somebody eventually is going to ask about what that tool is you're using, so I may as well invite you to talk about that if you want. I mean, how are you doing that?
Yeah, so we use 3, and it depends on your database in terms of its ability to connect with other tools. So always start with what are the tools we have and what integrates with that. We use Vidyard, Vidyard, Bonjoro, Bonjoro, and those 2 sort of automate a lot of the process. The other one that we use kind of cheaper or less fancy is called Loom, LOOM.com, and that doesn't send the email for you, but it allows you to create a video into the cloud in one step, which is the whole purpose of this. So
that's great. And by the way, Marcia was just asking about that. So I guess I was trying to read Marcia's mind. So thank you for the question, Marcia. And if we haven't totally tackled it, please feel free to supplement that question with other ones. Wow, now we have a guest.
Yes, my dog's been scratching at the door. So,
there's a lot in your book, and which I'm loving. And before we end today, I hope you'll tell everybody how they can get the copy, but which is available digitally as well as in print. But you have something in there. You have a bunch of things in there I wanted to refer to. But you talk about the kind of the point of the book, and you have a bunch of bullets that guide people through. One is about addressing root causes behind inaction, which you've been talking about a bit right now with us. Another is unlocking and evolving a fundraising mindset, identifying underlying issues plaguing small NPOs, building the capacity to recognize the scarcity mindset and self-sabotage, and then providing tools to tap into the confidence and spark excitement and ignite interest in giving. But I'd like to go back to a couple of those if we can. And one is about this unlocking and evolution of a fundraising mindset. So I know you've gotten to talking about the barriers that we have in our mind, and you've of course talked about that kind of Aristotle concept about the habits that make things work, which are so true. Are there other ways that we can help people to unlock maybe their natural ability to have that conversation that frees up a donor to give? So it's not about us, it's about them.
Yeah, so very often, so the way I like to think it's a very personal journey, right? All of us we are a result of our upbringing and our experiences. And so we come to the table with our own unique perspectives. And doing the reflection on, there's basically what happens is we are presented with circumstances. So let's say, I'll give you the example of the circumstances. I just want you to reach out to a donor and ask for a conversation, okay? Right. And you could, that's a great role for board members or reluctant fundraisers to play. Just get to know your donors. And again, this is one that they can do over and over again. What's happening is there's a circumstance which triggers a belief. So in this case, it might be, I'll use an example of a donor, a board member. So it might be that the board member doesn't feel, I love this one because I see it all the time. Maybe the board member is a lawyer and they're used to knowing all the things and they're really prepared for things. And so you're asking them to go into a meeting where they don't necessarily have all the answers, because let's face it, our board members aren't in the work every day. As much as they might know about the organization, they, I guarantee you, don't feel like they have enough information to have a conversation. Plus, they're so used to thinking about fundraising as pitching that they want to over prepare that pitch, right? We can talk about pitching in a few minutes. So you know what, let's lean into that. So, okay, your board, you're like, okay, let's mobilize the board just to have these conversations. Your board, their belief is that these conversations are supposed to be a pitch. And to them, a pitch is polished. It's talking at someone, right? You have 90 seconds to prepare to get your point across, and then you wait for a response, right? They have this very specific expectation, their belief around what that conversation is. And that belief brings up feelings. So if I don't feel like I have all of that information or a solid pitch, I'm going to feel like a fool. I'm going to feel like I'm not performing in the peak performance that I'm used to as a lawyer or what have you, right? And then that feeling triggers action or inaction. And so they're going to be like, okay, not doing it. And then of course our results they follow. And so what we have to do is it's almost like reverse engineer it. We have to identify what those feelings and beliefs are. And it's very personal, right? It's now I'm making generalizations because being around a lot of reluctant fundraisers, I could tell that example resonated because most of us have seen someone like that. But their story around why they don't want to feel unprepared, why they don't want to go into a situation where they feel like they're not polished or presenting well enough, that's going to be pretty personal. So we have to work with reluctant fundraisers where they are to start to uncover some of that history for them. And then once we do that, we can actually guide them through and show them why it's wrong. And so having that conversation, maybe they they have one of those meetings with a staff member or the executive director so that they can see what it's actually like to have one of those meetings where you're not pitching. There's very little talk about the organization from your perspective. It's really learning about your supporters. And so, but once is not enough for people. We have to do it over and over again to really have it sink in that this isn't an anomaly. Our brains are designed to generalize. So we can see one or two things and our brains kind of ignore that information if it's not congruent with what we believe. And so we actually need, repeated exposure.
I wonder how much we can lean into that by doing prep work that's both understanding the person and their fears, those dynamics, right? I mean, what drives the person, what emotions are present, but also just giving them enough tools that they can even go into those meetings to kind of develop that habit, even if as a secondary participant, maybe making testimony about the organization, why they give, not asking for anything, just being there to be a part of the team. What kind of preparation might be important to get them even to go to do that? Because some people they don't even want to go on that meeting because they're afraid of, again, the fear, right? It brings us from like a 9 to like a 13, to borrow from Matt Damon. It's that kind of fear. So how do we prep them enough that we can get them to start developing the habit?
Yeah. So I think part of it is listening, right? Very often we approach our board or reluctant fundraisers and we're like, it's so easy. Just go and do this. Go sell tickets to our event. Go open some doors, pull out the Rolodex. We minimize it and we kind of gloss over their reluctance. And that's not helpful for people. It's not helpful for their deepest fears to be glossed over. And so I think the first thing is actually, listen to what as fundraisers, we're usually trained on like listening to and understanding objections, right? And so we have to do that with our reluctant fundraisers on our team as well. What are they saying that could be clues as to what they're feeling and what their beliefs are? So if they're not going to sit there and do, well, I feel this and this is my belief, we are in a position usually where we can get some hints. Okay. So, I had a client who I pushed really hard on this and she kept saying like, I need more information. I need more information. And I was like, you don't? And what's going on? And after a while, it was actually like she was hearing her board and their questions that they would ask her. And so I didn't understand that. I was just like, no, it's simple. You got it. What have you? You don't need more information. Like, keep it short. That's too much detail. And she's like, no. And it was not what I expected. Her reluctance was not at all what I expected. She was trained by her board and specifically her board chair, and they wanted the details. And if they had a question that wasn't answered when they glossed through a document, they shut down the conversation. So understanding and listening to experiences. So finding those clues as to what might be behind someone's inaction, to then, unpack that. And in fact, in her situation, I said, okay, I get it. I now understand what you're dealing with. What is the information that we need to have, right? Because you can't get derailed in that way from your board. But other times it's been that, again, people, I'm trying to think of not that sort of same board example, but very often it's that we've had people say no to meetings to us. And what happens, our brain actually distorts. I think if you take anything away from this whole conversation, our brain distorts reality. It adds meaning when there is none. And so when we have that donor that said, oh, when you send an email or pick up the phone and say, oh, I'm calling, I'm new to the organization, I want to get to know you as a supporter and hear from you about your experience. And they say, oh no, don't bother with me, I'm no one, like don't waste your time. No. Okay, well then our brain amplifies the negative like significantly, I think 5 to 9 times more than positive. Okay, so all of a sudden that becomes the story. And we need to sort of say, okay, what's that experience? And then, we can say, okay, this is a numbers game. Not everyone wants to meet with you, and that's okay. To do this right doesn't mean getting a yes all the time. So it really is very personal, but understanding what signals they're giving you around what's going on in their feelings and beliefs helps you unpack that.
Cindy, how did you become so interested in the neuro dimensions of this? I mean, why? Because I know that you talk about how in your book about the consulting aspect about needing to fire a client, which is a great story. But I'm really curious about how you decided to delve into the way the brain works and how that influenced your work now with organizations that don't understand this, and they're not necessarily ready for that lesson.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, like, most people come into fundraising sort of by chance. Certainly in my generation, now it's a profession that you can like study and stuff like that. But when I graduated university, or even like, it was not something that I knew that was a professional option. But I've always been involved in organizations, and I love working with nonprofits, but I would never be a frontline worker. I'm not wired that way. And so when I discovered you could fundraise, like I was fundraising as a volunteer through university and stuff like that. And when I discovered that you could do this professionally, I was in. So I decided, I think I was in 2nd or 3rd year university, that I wanted to be a fundraiser, and I've been doing it ever since. And so for me, I've always had this conviction, 2 convictions. One is that the work in some ways stands on its own, that it's so important and we need to have these conversations. But also there are things in my life that absolutely make me comfortable. I'm not uncomfortable talking about money, right? I don't know what it was about my upbringing, probably a little bit of privilege and some other experiences, that it's always been something I've enjoyed, fundraising. And so when I started coming up against these reluctant fundraisers over and over and over again, I was like, what's going on here? And then I started my own business. And I started learning about running a business and how people feel about sales. And then I sort of got into this whole realm of research around how our brain works as entrepreneurs and, all of that. And so that you started to connect the dots for me and to say, okay, this is why people are so reluctant. And maybe I've been sort of lucky or intuitive around doing this kind of work for so long, but there's actually research and good science behind it.
Yeah, there certainly is. And the only reason why I'm familiar with some of this before reading some of what you've written and talking with you is because I know that the work that's done on fear in other things like fear of flying or fear of public speaking. There's a lot of great research that's been done, and ways to tackle it are almost a mirror of everything you're describing for us. So it does work.
Yeah.
A third of the population of the United States is afraid to fly. I don't know what the percentages are for people who are afraid to do public speaking, but it's very high. And these are all things that you can encounter by doing all these same techniques that you're describing. It really does work. But there's another dimension to this, which is interesting too. And that is, I'm sure, particularly prevalent at smaller organizations. And that is that some of the people who are going to need to prepare people to go out and be successful, to overcome these fears that they naturally have, they are their superiors. It's a staff member getting a board member to be prepared. It's an executive director essentially training a campaign committee chair. It's it's these kinds of asymmetrical relationships that where it may be a matter of training up. So what are your thoughts on that front, especially for the smaller organizations where it might be one person or a small group of people responsible for everything, and now they also have to be able to take a person who's a leader in their community and get them to do something that they are afraid to do?
Yeah. So the first thing is, my dog's really annoying tonight. Or now he's like demanding attention. So the first thing is you have to get comfortable yourself. I know that as a profession, we talk all the time about the importance of boards in fundraising and their involvement and volunteers, but you cannot get their involvement if you're not comfortable fundraising. And so it's just going to be frustrating and a failure for everyone. And in fact, a lot of the times when we come in and work with organizations right now, we don't involve the board in fundraising until we've started to pick up some momentum and steam, because people want to be on the winning team, right? They want to be with success, and they need to understand and trust that you're going to be successful with their efforts. And so I always say to organizations, like, yes, we know you're supposed to be, the board is supposed to be fundraising and opening doors and all that stuff. If they're not there, they're not there yet. I don't think it's a make or break to fundraising success. It's helpful and it can make things faster and easier, but it's definitely not required. Sorry. So the first thing is start with yourself. If you're not comfortable fundraising, you're not going to convince anyone else to do it. All right. It sounds straightforward, but you'd be surprised. So that's the first thing. And then again, like, get some success, get to know, don't wait for people. Don't wait for permission to do this work. Use the capacity that you have, get started, and work slowly, right? Like, I'm also a big believer that if you want to start bringing this up at the board level, don't just bring it up in a board meeting. Like, oh, let's talk about how we can fundraise. You will get derailed so fast, because everyone will either have ideas that are mostly not helpful, or they will just start dumping like names of big corporations. We need this bank and that bank and what have you. I always, if there's something important I need the board to buy into, I usually have one-on-one conversations with board members in advance, build buy-in. I always think of the movie Inception with Leonardo DiCaprio, where it's like this idea of planting ideas in people. If you can think about that, like, how do you have that conversation so that they come to the conclusion with the conversation instead of you telling them what that conclusion is? If you can do that, then they're going to start to buy in. They're going to start to take action. And the more they do it, the better they'll feel. So. Right.
I'm going to be imagining Leo DiCaprio doing trainings for fundraising. It's just, that's very funny. Maybe hypnosis is required. I don't know.
There you go. Yeah.
I also want to just, as a kind of a final thing, even though there's so much in the book, make sure I don't leave aside that other thing. You talked about identifying underlying issues that plague small nonprofits. What kinds of issues are these? And
oh my goodness,
are the things we're talking about ways to address them?
Yeah. So these are issues like just the general undervaluing of our work. It's not unique to small organizations, but I think it's more prevalent or more acute. So, organizations that don't pay well have, all of this belief that, again, like that's sort of put on us as a sector, but we hear it and feel it so often that it becomes our beliefs, whether or not we're aware of it, that we shouldn't, get the raise, or that we shouldn't be paying well, or, we shouldn't be funding staff. All of these things come up. Technology and capacity is a really big one. There's scarcity mindset that like I can't spend $150 a month on a database. That's too much money that we don't have. But then we have an admin person manually creating tax receipts. I guarantee you, if you did the math, you'll see that technology is a way better option. We don't like change as a sort of human nature. People do not like change. And that is a big challenge for our sector, for all sectors. But our inability to evolve because we're so comfortable with the way things have always been done. So these are some of the chronic challenges I feel are experienced by smaller organizations. And all of them fundamentally, yes, come down to what shortcuts our brains are making, those decisions that we're not aware of. And so, and that have been developed over, exposure and repetition. So the process is the same. We have to learn how to rewire that narrative for us and for the people around us. And it's work, right? It's hard, and sometimes requires a little bit of faith as well, but it's so important to us stepping into our potential as organizations and as leaders of organizations.
Talking about good habits isn't sexy, but then but if you don't build those good habits, it's you have the result of the bad habits. I mean, you have those same things. You have this funny line in the book about I'm never going to reach for a salad when it's sitting beside a pint of Ben and Jerry's, which I thought was hilarious, but it's also so true, right? I mean, everybody wants, well, most of us want the ice cream, but we all know that the salad is probably better for us. A little ice cream once in a while is great. But that's the same kind of inertia. I mean, it's just that we keep going back to the easy thing.
And we fill our stomachs in that situation with the Ben and Jerry's, so there's no room for the salad. And so what happens is and I hear this all the time from organizations, I'm too busy to fundraise. I'm too busy to send that personalized video. I'm too busy to reach out and have that conversation with a donor. Are you too busy, or did you fill up on the ice cream, right? Are you looking at what's on your to-do list? These things are urgent. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, or they're routine, and I feel comfortable doing them. And so I'm going to focus on those things instead of building the habits that I want to be building. And so that is very, very common. And I don't buy that excuse. Time, to me, we're bad at using time. We are very bad at perceiving time. And we're really bad at understanding our decisions around using time. And so if we can bring more light to that and how we look at making those decisions. And again, the idea behind this is to make it so that your default, the autopilot, reaches for the salad. That it becomes, you fill up on the salad and you have a little bit of ice cream with what's left, right? And so we want to shift that, and we have to, we can't trick our brains, right? We can't just look at that in the moment and be like, I'm gonna weigh it. Our brains are too, like, this is evolutionary, right? There's too many decisions we have to make. It needs to lighten the load. And so we need to be able to make that our default, at least starting point. I'm not saying never eat the ice cream, but let's fill up on salad first. let's prioritize fundraising, the habits around fundraising, and then we can enjoy a scoop of ice cream. So it's really, I love the metaphor because I love ice cream. I hate salads.
I like that you picked Ben and Jerry's too. Okay, so what's your favorite flavor? What's your favorite flavor?
There's two. One is the Tonight Dough. It's the, what's his name? The Tonight Show host.
Oh, Stephen. Not Stephen Colbert. That's the
one from SNL. Jimmy Fallon.
Dream.
Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah, Jimmy Fallon. Yeah.
And then the other is peanut butter half baked, which is like brownie and cookie dough and peanut butter stuff. I don't know. It's really
wow.
good.
You really go right for the dough. That's interesting.
Yes.
I mean, that says a lot. You know, you're not afraid to eat it before it's totally baked. You just go right for it.
Exactly.
I think that's awesome. Yeah, that's a fearlessness in your ice cream too, which I appreciate. Before we, I have another question for you, but before I ask it, I want to first of all let everybody know, because we were asked this earlier by a member of the audience, that there is a recording of this being made. It will be posted to DonorSearch's YouTube channel, which is in the process of being remade. We have about 500 pieces of different webinars and webcasts, some CFRE accredited, some conversations like this one, lots of things, including the Masterminds podcast, which has just been renewed. We have 3 episodes that are about to deploy, another 6 that are in a different stage of editing. So all of that will be available there. And then the podcasts themselves, of course, on your favorite network. So a copy of this will be available in just a few days. So be on the lookout for that. And if anybody has a question or a comment, feel free to ask it now. Otherwise, I'm going to end with a question for you, and then, of course, welcome you to say anything else you might want to share. You have a line in the book which may not be central to everything you're talking about, but I suspect it is woven into everything you think about, which is that it is not up to us to decide who can or cannot give. And it's something that really resonated for me. Can you talk about why you said that there, how it relates to the book, and how it relates to your work? Why is it important?
Yes, this is a hill I'm willing to die on. I've been, as I said, I've been fundraising for pretty close to 20 years. I wrote a thesis on grassroots or feminist fundraising, and I've worked in social justice-based organizations. And I can't tell you how often our reluctance to fundraise is disempowering to the communities we serve. So when we say, oh no, we can't ask so-and-so for money, they don't have any, first of all, that's not our decision to make. I believe that the act of giving is the act of creating the world that we want to live in, creating the future that we believe in. And when we take that right away from someone by not involving them in the opportunity to give, it is deeply disempowering and usually contrary to our missions. So that is something that I'm very passionate about. And I'm not saying like ask one of your clients for $1 million, or even asking them when they are a client, right? That might not be appropriate. But I absolutely, like, we have this belief around who can give and who cannot give, and it's very disempowering, and it's kind of elitist, and it's not up to us, right? If we look at fundraising as this tool to change the world, I could also talk about if we look at this as a way to if we think about our organizations as the ultimate holders of power, we often think of as our funders. If we can look at a way to redistribute that power to our communities by not asking one major foundation for $10,000, but engaging all their community to give in small amounts on a regular basis, all of a sudden, we're accountable to those people first and foremost. And to me, that is the ultimate, social justice approach to our work. Now, there are definitely other models and lots of other cool things happening in our sector around trust philanthropy and all these other things. But that one, it's something that I've lived with, like I said, for a very long time, and it makes my blood boil when we feel like we're totally projecting our beliefs onto other people.
Right. Not giving them the chance to do what they maybe would love to do, if only they were invited to do so. That's maybe a beautiful way to end. Thank you so much, Cindy, for all of this. Before you go, though, can you tell people how to get your book?
Absolutely. So the book is called Raise It, The Reluctant Fundraiser's Guide to Raising Money Without Selling Your Soul. You can buy it where you buy books. And if you want to buy it directly from us, it's raiseitbook.com, really straightforward. And of course, that just means less money to Jeff Bezos or whoever, and more money to little old me. So we definitely appreciate it, but it does take a little longer to ship than the big places. But yeah, there's the audiobook, the ebook, and the physical book, all available on our website.
Excellent. And for people interested in your company, how can they learn more about that?
The Good Partnership. So thegoodpartnership.com, Cindy at thegoodpartnership.com for email, or you can find us on most social media at The Good Partnership or some variation of it. I'd say we're most active on Instagram and LinkedIn, but we dabble in the others too. So
right, and you can tell by listening to her that she practices what she preaches. So the firm is committed to these same principles, not just the practice of all of us, but in the work that they choose to do for the good of the world. It's been better than the name. So I hope you'll get a copy of the book and check out the website. And a copy of this recording, of course, once again, will be posted over on the DonorSearch YouTube channel. So that means that for those reluctant fundraisers in your office who didn't show up today, you can give them a link to this, and hopefully they will get the courage to be the better versions themselves, make a better community for us all. Thank you so much, Cindy. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody here, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Till then, take care.